All right, everybody, welcome to your favorite 30 minutes of the day. Around the table, some familiar faces: Blair Malestravich, Al Foster, Jess Cable, all Go Winnipeg on-air personalities, and a very special guest we brought on board, Dr. Carol Kerbis. Thank you so much for agreeing to being on here.
Thank you for having me. It's great.
She was a little bit nervous about meeting us because we are a very ruthless panel.
Yeah.
And we're very cruel to our guests.
Uh-oh.
No, it's just going to be great. We've had a great conversation the last couple of days, so it's going to be a great couple of segments. The reason that we brought you on, other than the fact that you're a lovely person, you have 2 children.
I have 2 boys, yes.
2 boys, and you've been married for how many years?
Oh, now you're going to put me on the spot.
Yeah.
Almost 25 years, pretty close. So.
You should write a book.
Yeah.
This will come in handy later on in the show.
Yes.
In our third segment. But we brought you on to talk a little bit about vaccinations and the current measles outbreak. I don't want to say outbreak because that's a bit of an overstatement. Only 8 confirmed cases in Winnipeg, but people are watching these numbers carefully. So can you kind of set the stage for us as to why we're watching those numbers?
Well, certainly anytime we have any kind of vaccine preventable disease like measles, and particularly measles, we don't see it around very often. So even just one case of measles is a concern to us. So we pay really close attention to anything, whether it's measles, mumps, or other vaccine preventable diseases, because we know we can prevent them. So, it's always a concern when they appear.
Yeah, these are vaccine prevented, and so is there some concerns about those vaccinations dropping?
Well, certainly as we saw last week, the PEG released a report where they looked at immunizations for measles at 7 years of age. And at the 7-year age, you require 2 doses of measles, and those rates of 7-year-olds who have both recommended doses were dropping over the last decade. So that's really a concern to us. It's a concern anytime immunization rates drop.
Mm-hmm. Are you guys all immunized, fully immunized?
Yeah, I think in South America, I can't even get yellow fever. I can't get anything anymore. Yeah. I'm not even gonna get scurvy. Okay.
And I'm just going back to, childhood immunization from the 70s.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long, stuff like that holds, but I think I'm okay.
Well, in the case of measles vaccine, it's what we call a live vaccine. So it's very effective and it produces long-term immunity. So most people who have been immunized remain covered for most of their lives. So it's a good vaccine.
Yes.
I'm good. You're good. but something with measles, though, from what I understand, is that if you've been vaccinated, pretty much you're okay. But if you haven't been vaccinated, you have no chance of not getting it if you come into contact with it.
Yeah,
Really?
measles is very contagious, which is one of the concerns that we have when it's introduced into a population. And one of the things about measles is you're contagious for about 4 days before the rash appears. So, if you're not immunized and you're exposed to someone who is incubating the measles virus and they're contagious at that point, you won't even know that they're sick. So it's really a risk to you as an individual if you're not fully immunized.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that Dr. Kerbis was telling me yesterday when I spoke with her was that the fact that people aren't thinking about it as much. Like I know with my kids, they're 7 and 9, and they haven't had chicken pox, they haven't had measles. I'm pretty sure I had all of those things by the time I could talk, right? And so people aren't seeing it, and they're not. So they're not, that fear base, I guess, isn't like getting them out there to make sure they're immunized. Like, did you guys all have chicken pox? Do you remember?
I remember having chicken pox for sure.
And I certainly recall having mumps as a child as well.
Mumps, really? You had it, eh?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm interested because I lived in Lethbridge last year, and Southern Alberta had an outbreak of measles last year. It was a school, actually. A kid, they thought that it originated from a child who had traveled to the Netherlands and then came back and brought the measles. So I don't know. It was really big news in Southern Alberta last year. I wonder, how come Manitobans didn't, now it's happening here. I don't know. It's I've heard of people, in the past couple of years, I've heard the word measles a lot. So it's strange to me that.
See, to me, I feel like measles like disappeared. Like I feel like even chickenpox. I feel like people don't even get chickenpox anymore.
Well, being a parent, you always talk about having the chickenpox party, right?
Yeah.
If one child gets, then you get all the other children there, right? But yeah, I agree with you. I was actually really surprised to hear the measles word in the context of North America.
Well, and for many years, we didn't see many cases of measles. So just in the last couple of years, we've seen more and more cases. Here in Winnipeg, we had a small mumps outbreak last year, and that was a real concern to us as well. Fortunately, with the mumps outbreak, it was more or less localized to a population where the immunization rates were quite low, so we were able to go in and provide some immunizations to that population, and were able to control the outbreak so it didn't spread much further. For measles, we've seen cases showing up all over the province, so it's not really isolated to a specific community, so it becomes a little bit more challenging, and we really need to put the word out there that everyone needs to check and make sure that you've been fully immunized. For children, it's 2 doses. For adults, generally it's the 1 dose that's recommended that they should have received earlier in their childhood years.
I do have to admit, when I was, you look at Facebook and all social media, and everyone had the immunize, don't immunize debate, right? It was going on forever, and you see it for months, and then all of a sudden, in my brain, I kind of, and I apologize for this, but I kind of smirked when there was a first story that said someone found measles, because I was like, oh, okay, well, a lot of people aren't going to do it, and then measles was like, hey, what about me? Maybe you should get immunized. Like all of a sudden, this disease that I hadn't heard about for a couple years magically started coming up once all these people decided not to get immunized. I know that's not really debate, but I mean, it's just interesting.
But I think that's an important part of it, because I automatically think that if vaccinations are going down or immunizations are going down, that it is because people are saying, oh, I'm afraid that's going to cause my child autism, even though that's been completely debunked. But is it that people are against it, or is it apathy?
Yeah, well, one thing that we know by looking at all our immunization rates is even when we look at that 7-year-old immunization rate for measles vaccines, most of those children have actually received 1 dose. So over 90% of children have received that first dose of measles when they were about 1 year of age. But it's that second dose that they're missing just before they go into school. And what we've seen over time is generally the children who are newborns, where they go into their doctor at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. You get into that pattern of going to see your doctor and going to get those immunizations. And we've added more and more vaccines to protect against more diseases, which is a great thing. But on the other hand, it also gives more opportunities for ones to be missed. And then you kind of get out of the habit of going in all the time after that 18-month checkup, and you bring your children in for other things, ear infections or colds or whatever it may be when they're sick, and you forget about going in to make sure that their immunizations are up to date, right? Yeah. And when you look at the immunization record, well, suddenly there's all these vaccines on your immunization record, and you may not know if you're missing one. So that 7-year-old indicator where kids are missing that second shot, it's most likely that they're missing it and don't realize that they need that, or have forgotten that they need it, or maybe their provider doesn't realize that they need it. So it's not so much that we're seeing people staying away from vaccines. Most people get immunized, so we're not concerned that there's a huge trend of people staying away from them. There are some people who choose not to, and certainly we need to address that and keep an eye on that. But for the most part, people want to be immunized.
I just think it's interesting to do, sorry to cut you off there, Al, but I want to talk. So I just think it's interesting that, like you said, when they're really young and the child is in a controlled environment. I also have no kids, so this might sound like it doesn't make any sense that I'm saying this, but I mean, and they're small, and you get those vaccinations when they're really young, when they live in the farthest they go, maybe is their house or maybe the park or something. Right. I would think, they get that first immunization, and then when you're about to send them into a place where there's like hundreds of other kids and hundreds of potential carriers, you'd think you'd make sure you like collect the whole set as far as like getting every single vaccination, because then you at least you know your child is protected, right?
Yeah, it seems like it's about getting back into the pattern of doing that. You gotta get your haircut, you gotta get your dentist appointment, and you gotta get your immunization.
Exactly, and we try to remind people when they go into school, we have a little letter saying, remember, you need to have all your immunizations. And it really depends on the disease. Like sometimes you think of them being passed from person to person, and that's the case for measles. So certainly we're concerned if the immunization rates are low. But for things like tetanus lives in the environment, in the soil. So, it doesn't matter how much you isolate yourself from the rest of the world.
Unless you're in a bubble.
There's soils all around, and so there's various reasons to get immunized.
Awesome.
I was just really curious, though, if this will lead to maybe further collaboration between traditional medical practitioners and the naturopath community, because when it came to the whole flu vaccine, I dare say the naturopath community were ones that were pushing not to get immunized, not to get the flu vaccine. And I wonder if that, if this will lead to more communication, maybe the two worlds can work better together.
Well, certainly, we are open to, discussions with other practitioners. We're open to, discussing, we really want people to get the best information, and really their health is what we're most concerned with. So any collaboration is always a good thing. I think we're all on the same page, right? We all want people to be healthy
and not give each other measles.
Well, exactly. But clearly, when we look at vaccines, they're looking back in history, they're one of the best things that we have done for public health, and the fact that we don't see these diseases around anymore, that's a great thing. But it causes challenges for us because people, are less concerned about them and think, they're not going to be exposed to them. And, with air travel and everything else, it's only, exactly.
Well, from immunization apathy to voter apathy, we're going to take a quick break and come back to that.